Welcome to KennyRoy.com. I'm Kenny Roy. This is the Ask Video Mail for SIGGRAPH Week, August 8th, 2011. I'm off in Canada right now as we speak, running around the convention, doing some presentations. If you're at SIGGRAPH, please come find me. There's a schedule posted on the blog and also on my Facebook page, all the places that I'm giving talks. So come find me and say hello. Love to meet people from the site. Thank you for coming. Thank you for supporting the site. Welcome to the new members. This is the Ask Video Mail where you can get your question in character animation or performance answered in a video mail like this one, but you have to send in a question if you want it answered. So send your questions to webmaster@kennyroy.com. I promise to read all the questions and answer the ones I think will help the most people. Now this video mail question, it's interesting. I kind of had like a total brain fart because when I went and presented at Evolve conference in Orlando in, what was it, April I think, I started the intermediate cartoony lecture with the beginning cartoony lecture, and then basically the intermediate cartoony lecture that you saw on the site was the second half of the lecture that I gave to the people. But in the first half, I've greatly edited my cartoony lecture because we need to have a discussion about style. And I thought that you guys, I don't know why I thought this, but I thought that you guys had seen that. So this ask question was a little bit of a surprise to me. So I really think it's advantageous that we just go over this, and so you'll see what I'm talking about. Let's take a look at the question. So, style. As you can probably tell now, when I was giving the cartoony lecture in Orlando, I had to start out with style and what style actually is. I find that there's very little understanding of what style really is in terms of animation. Or people kind of think that there's just one or two different styles and that's it. Well, it's not true at all. It's not true in the slightest. What style is, very, very simply put, is this. And this is the conclusion that we drew together at the conference in Orlando. But style is the consistent answer to all of the questions that you ask yourself when you're designing a shot, when you're designing your animation, that deal with the fundamentals and fundamental choices. All right, and the reason let's go backwards through that. Why did I emphasize fundamentals and fundamental choices? Because you can't just sprinkle style in at the end of your shot, at the end of the life of your shot. It will not work. Period. Done. Good night. Goodbye. No way. So it has to be the fundamental choices. And by fundamentals, I truly mean when you are choosing your fundamentals, when you are adding the spice to your scene, when you're pushing your poses, when you are deciding the squash and stretch and the anticipation, the follow through and the overlap and all that. If you haven't seen the cartoony lecture that's in the shop, or the intermediate cartoony lecture, which I think is still in the shop or still available, because I uploaded the lecture like on the 25th last month, I decided to keep it up for a few weeks the last month and not archive it right away, so you can still view that content. But what I want you to be, to know about and to be on board with is just the idea that your style is not a late in the game choice. You can't take a scene that you pretty much animated one way and turn it into another. And that's the fundamental of the cartoony style that I described. So if you haven't seen it, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but you really do have to go see those two lectures, cartoony, excuse me, cartoony animation basics and intermediate cartoony. Okay, so when I say it's the answer to questions, the consistent answer to questions, what do I mean by that? Well, do you get a certain style when you just have everything have squash and stretch? Let's take cartoony for an example. No, the answer is no. You don't have cartoony style if everything is squashing and stretching crazily, walking down the street, the door opens, someone waves their hand, all that. That's not a style. Because the animator hasn't asked themselves a question as to how is this fundamental going to contribute to the visuals that I'm trying to emphasize. It's clear if you have squash and stretch on everything, then you're emphasizing nothing, right? Because everything's the same. So you have to ask yourself a question: when am I going to push squash and stretch? How about whenever anyone really is scared? Let's just make squash and stretch the scared fundamental. It can be anything. I'm just choosing one. So don't take this as verbatim or as a hard and fast rule, but I'm just choosing one. Okay, so let's just say it's scared. All right? So if you have a character that looks around the corner, and right when he looks around the corner, there's a cannon right there, with a lit fuse about to blow up. Then you cut to the wide shot, you can see the cannon and him looking around the corner, and he anticipates and really squashes down and boom, thin as a noodle, shoots away from the cannon, screaming, ah, right? By doing that, what you've done is you've ironed in, you've kind of etched it in stone. From that point on, what basically you have to realize is that you've made your first stylistic choice. That inflated squash and stretch is going to signify, support, emphasize fear. Okay? Just as an example. And you can use it for other things. You can go the opposite. Something that should have squash and stretch. If someone is angry, all right, and if they're afraid, their spine is squashing and stretching as they're running away. But if they turn around and they're angry, maybe you'll solidify that. You'll make it so that all that squash and stretch that was in there, even like a big roly-poly kind of, like Santa Claus kind of character who you would expect to really squash and stretch on their run cycle, when they're angry, all of a sudden everything is hard, like a rock, and it looks like their whole body is tense and flexing, something like that. Okay, so without the choice, you get no emphasis. Without asking the right question, what do I want to adjust? What do I want to change from reality to emphasize a certain aspect of the performance, a certain aspect of the emotion, of the character arc, whatever it is in the scene? If you don't ask yourself the question, you are not really doing style. All right? And these are questions you have to ask yourself before you even start. The way that it is communicated, that's a really good question. How is it communicated? In a scene or on a show, I've only been on a couple really cartoony shows that had really any style to speak of. Kong was very, I did some tests of my own, that I tried to push a little bit here and there, but really it was a very realistic show. So I would say Scooby-Doo and Garfield are probably the only ones that I've worked on that had a real style. And basically how it works is the animators who are really good, your leads normally, will start animating shots long before you're brought in as a freelance animator. Or you'll all be working together, either way, and certain scenes will be picked out and there'll be almost a model sheet decided upon for the animations. There'll be like a directory or an easily accessible place where you can find these animations that the director said, oh, that's really, really good. In fact, on Garfield, if I'm not mistaken, we had a tail guide. We had a couple shots that the studio, Fox, said that they're paying for the tail, and they want the tail. So let's see the tail. So there's that. It's not as if you need to be executing animation 100% in style from the get-go, no mistakes. That'd be way too much pressure, way too hard to do. No one could do that. Okay, so it's communicated through the work. Everyone ramps up slowly. However, there's kind of an interesting thing, which is that I've never seen a collage that really looks like extremely, should we say, extremely different from any other. Meaning, it's almost as if the combination of all styles is homogenized enough that it's a style in itself. So even the animators, like on Ice Age 3, I remember Blue Sky brought in like 24 animators for like the last 8 weeks or something like that. And they had to get through like 600 shots like in that much time. So it was a huge rush. When you're going like shot to shot to shot, when it's like 2 seconds long, 3 seconds long, and it's not like the really super high character moments, then you're not going to get into too much trouble having your own style, having your own emphasis, as long as you are asking yourself the questions and you are trying to follow it. Okay, so basically, style, to just kind of recap and to make make it simple and to encourage you to do it. Style is the first thing. It's the first question that you need to be asking yourself. It's not the last, and it's certainly not anywhere in the middle. It's more like, even before you're planning, you need to ask yourself, and this is where I'm trying to encourage you, you need to ask yourself, what do I want to accomplish? What have I done in animation, and where do I want to go? Where do I want to be? Do I want to try to push the envelope, or do I want to just get a lot of practice doing realistic animation because I want to work on Transformers? Both are fine. Neither is better. They're both fantastic. Okay, but you need to ask yourself these questions. And I try to encourage you guys to ask yourself these kind of like bigger questions, these career and life path kind of questions in the articles and in Videomail, so that you won't end up in a position where you're 5 years into your career and you're realizing that you have basically coasted along. And you might be happy what you're doing right at that moment, but you realize that you'd be happier doing something else. Okay? Because at the end of the day, animation is a job. And it does get extremely difficult. If it's not the rigs breaking, it's your computer crashing. If it's not your computer crashing, it's the long weekends of work. There's a lot to contend with, and you do need to stay very, very, very well motivated in order to be successful. So these are the questions I want you to ask yourself. So basically the answer is, style is communicated through the work. It's not as if you need to go through a boot camp, or you need to be careful about producing animation that looks exactly like it's supposed to right off the bat. There's plenty of warm-up time you will get. And style is not an afterthought. It is a forethought. It is actually the first thought that you should have. And it is basically your consistent answer to the question, what do I want to do fundamentally to emphasize a certain aspect of the performance? Most of cartoony style is simplified down to, and at least in novice animators' mind, of snappy timing. That word, snappy timing, it basically means very, very, very short transitions. But if you're just doing that, what are you actually doing? You're not emphasizing anything. If every single one of your transitions is super short, you're not emphasizing anything. True cartoony style, the transitions are shortened and made really, really quick. and snappy, so that something in that scene will seem extremely emphasized and will stand out. If it's a person, you know, like maybe someone's like tapping on the desk or clicking a pen or something like that, and the other person who's been extremely like static and slow moving up until that point, all of a sudden goes and grabs the pen and then puts it down. That is style. That contrast is a very, very intelligent decision. It's a very thoughtful decision for the animation. Okay? So I encourage you all to investigate style, to come up with your own style, push the envelope, ask yourself the challenging questions, ask them first, and just work really, really hard, because style is difficult to attain. It's hard to stay consistent. It's hard for your answers themselves to motivate you to do the animation that you need to. It's easier just to put squash and stretch on everything, but not to ask yourself the hard question, what am I emphasizing here? Okay? Great question. Check out those cartoony lectures. You're not going to be sorry if you do. You'll really like them. And there's some really cool scene files included with those lectures as well. So it's a lot of fun stuff to look at. Okay? Well, thank you for the great question. Please send in more. I can always use more Ask Video Mail questions. And the address to send them to is webmaster@kennyroy.com. I promise I read all the questions and I answer the ones I think will help the most people. So if you haven't done that yet, it's the best way to get your full money's worth of the site. It's a video made for you. So check it out if you haven't already. Thanks a lot. Find me at SIGGRAPH and Kick Butt Animating. Thanks a lot. As always, rock on.